The familiar theme music of CNN's Anderson Cooper 360 filled studios across America as millions of viewers settled in for what they thought would be another routine political interview. It was a Tuesday evening in March 2025, and the political landscape was as fractured as ever, with truth and fiction blending together in an endless stream of competing narratives that left many Americans unsure of what to believe. In the iconic CNN studio, under the bright lights that had illuminated countless historic moments in television journalism, Anderson Cooper sat across from Senator Mike Johnson, a Republican from Louisiana, who had become one of the most vocal defenders of his party's increasingly controversial claims about everything from election integrity to economic policy. What happened in the next 18 minutes didn't just destroy Senator Johnson's carefully crafted political narrative. It became a masterclass in how real journalism could still hold power accountable, even in an era when politicians seemed immune to consequences for their lies. But Cooper wasn't just conducting an interview that night. He was defending the very foundation of democratic discourse, the idea that facts matter, that truth exists, and that the American people deserve to know the difference between reality and political theater. Before we dive into this incredible confrontation, hit that like button and subscribe, because this is exactly the kind of journalism integrity and accountability that democracy needs to survive. Trust me, you won't want to miss how a master journalist dismantles political lies in real time with nothing but facts, preparation, and moral authority. To understand the magnitude of what happened that evening, you need to know who these two men were and why this confrontation represented something much bigger than a simple political interview. Anderson Cooper had spent 3 decades building one of the most respected careers in American journalism. Born into privilege as the son of fashion designer Gloria Vanderbilt, Cooper could have chosen any path in life. Instead, he had dedicated himself to the pursuit of truth, starting as a war correspondent covering conflicts in Bosnia, Rwanda, and Somalia before becoming one of CNN's most trusted anchors. Cooper's approach to journalism was old school in the best sense. He believed in thorough preparation, rigorous fact-checking, and the principle that journalists had a responsibility to challenge powerful people regardless of their political affiliation. He had interviewed presidents and dictators, covered natural disasters and human tragedies, always maintaining the same standard: respect for the facts and accountability for those in power. Over the years, Cooper had earned a reputation for his calm demeanor under pressure and his ability to ask tough questions without losing his professional composure. He didn't grandstand or try to become the story himself. He simply did the work, the hard, methodical work of real journalism that required hours of preparation for every minute of airtime. His show, Anderson Cooper 360, had become appointment television for viewers who wanted more than just talking heads, repeating partisan talking points. They wanted journalism, real investigation, real accountability, real pursuit of truth. And Cooper had built his career on delivering exactly that. Senator Mike Johnson, by contrast, represented a new breed of politician who had risen to prominence in the Trump era. A former lawyer who had served in the Louisiana state legislature before winning his congressional seat, Johnson had quickly established himself as one of the most reliable defenders of conservative orthodoxy, regardless of the facts. Johnson had built his political brand on never backing down, never admitting error, and always finding a way to spin any situation to his advantage. He was a frequent guest on cable news shows, where he had perfected the art of delivering confident-sounding talking points that were often divorced from reality but difficult to challenge in the limited time format of most television interviews. He was particularly skilled at what political strategists called flooding the zone, making so many different claims so quickly that fact-checkers couldn't keep up and opponents couldn't address them all in real time. It was a strategy that had served him well in most media appearances, where friendly hosts rarely challenged his assertions, and time constraints prevented deep dives into the truth. But Johnson had made a crucial mistake in agreeing to appear on Anderson Cooper 360. He had assumed it would be like his other cable news appearances, a chance to deliver his talking points to a national audience without serious pushback. He had no idea that Cooper had spent days preparing for this interview, fact-checking every claim Johnson had made in recent months, and gathering the documentation to prove what was true and what was not. The interview began routinely enough, with Cooper asking about Johnson's recent legislative priorities and the upcoming congressional agenda. Johnson launched into his standard talking points about economic growth, border security, and government accountability, delivering them with the polished confidence of someone who had given the same speech dozens of times. But Cooper was listening carefully, not just to what Johnson was saying, but to the specific claims he was making, claims that Cooper knew were false or misleading based on his extensive preparation for the interview. About 6 minutes into the interview, Johnson made the kind of sweeping statement that had become his trademark. "Anderson, the American people know that under our leadership, we've seen unprecedented economic growth, the strongest border security in decades, and the most transparent government in history." This was the moment Cooper had been waiting for. He had spent hours reviewing economic data, border statistics, and government transparency reports. He knew that virtually every element of Johnson's claim was either false or deeply misleading. Cooper leaned forward slightly, his expression becoming more focused. "Senator Johnson," he said, his voice carrying the authority of 3 decades in journalism, "the American people deserve the truth, and I think we need to examine those claims carefully." The phrase hung in the air like a challenge. Johnson's confident smile wavered slightly as he realized this wasn't going to be the friendly platform he had expected. "Let's start with economic growth," Cooper continued, his tone remaining calm but becoming more pointed. "You say we've seen unprecedented growth under your party's leadership, but according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, GDP growth during the period you're referencing has actually been below the historical average for post-recession recovery periods." He turned slightly toward the camera, speaking directly to viewers while keeping Johnson in his peripheral vision. "We fact-checked this claim before the show. The data shows that economic growth during the time Senator Johnson is referencing averaged 2.1% annually, compared to 3.2% during comparable periods in the 1990s and early 2000s. Johnson tried to interrupt, but Cooper held up his hand with the quiet authority of someone who knew he had the facts on his side. "I'm not finished, Senator. You also claim the strongest border security in decades, but Department of Homeland Security data shows that border apprehensions, which is the standard measure of border crossing attempts, have actually increased during the period you're discussing. If border security were stronger, we would expect to see fewer attempts, not more." The studio was silent, except for the hum of cameras and the distant sound of the newsroom beyond the glass walls. Johnson sat there, clearly unprepared for this level of scrutiny. "And your claim about transparent government," Cooper continued, his voice gaining strength. "The American people deserve to know that according to the Government Accountability Office, your administration has actually decreased transparency by reducing the number of Freedom of Information Act requests fulfilled, eliminating several public data sources, and classifying documents at rates higher than previous administrations." Johnson finally found his voice, but his confidence was clearly shaken. "Anderson, you're cherry-picking data to support a liberal narrative." "Senator," Cooper interrupted, his tone sharp enough to cut through the political spin, "these aren't liberal or conservative numbers. These are government statistics compiled by career civil servants using methodologies that have been consistent across multiple administrations of both parties." He leaned forward, looking directly at Johnson. "The American people deserve the truth, not political spin. And the truth is that virtually every major claim you just made is contradicted by official government data." The confrontation was just beginning. For the next 12 minutes, Cooper systematically dismantled one false claim after another, not with opinion or bias, but with documented facts and verified data. When Johnson claimed his party had reduced government spending, Cooper cited Congressional Budget Office reports showing increased deficits. When Johnson insisted they had improved health care access, Cooper referenced Department of Health and Human Services data showing decreased enrollment in key programs. When Johnson boasted about job creation, Cooper provided Labor Department statistics showing that job growth had actually slowed during the period in question. Each fact check was delivered with surgical precision. Cooper didn't raise his voice, didn't become emotional, didn't resort to partisan attacks. He simply presented facts, cited sources, and gave Johnson the opportunity to respond, knowing that any response would either be an admission of error or an attempt to argue with documented reality. The effect was devastating. Johnson, who had built his career on never being effectively challenged, found himself face to face with a journalist who had done his homework and wasn't going to let false claims slide by unchallenged. "Senator," Cooper said about 15 minutes into the interview, "I want to give you a chance to clarify something. You've made these claims in multiple interviews over the past month. Were you not aware that they contradicted official government data, or did you choose to make them despite knowing they were false?" It was a masterful question, one that forced Johnson to choose between admitting incompetence or dishonesty. Either answer would be politically damaging. Johnson's response was telling. Instead of addressing the substance of Cooper's fact checks, he fell back on the standard playbook of attacking the messenger. "Anderson, it's clear you have a bias here. You're trying to make me look bad instead of focusing on the real issues." Cooper's response was immediate and devastating. "Senator, I'm not trying to make you look any particular way. I'm simply presenting facts and asking you to explain why your public statements contradict official government data. If that makes you look bad, perhaps the problem isn't with the facts." The silence that followed was deafening. Johnson sat there, clearly out of his depth, unable to defend claims that were contradicted by the very government data he claimed to support. But Cooper wasn't finished. He had saved the most damaging fact check for last. "Senator, there's one more thing the American people deserve to know about," Cooper said, his tone becoming more serious. 3 weeks ago, you held a press conference where you claimed that your committee's investigation had found no evidence of wrongdoing in the case we've been discussing. But yesterday, your own committee released documents showing that your staff actually found substantial evidence of problems, but chose not to include it in the public report. He paused, letting the implications sink in. "How do you explain telling the American people that no evidence existed when your own investigators had actually found evidence that contradicted your public statements?" Johnson's face went pale. This was clearly information he hadn't expected Cooper to have access to. That's not... The documents you're referring to are preliminary." "Senator," Cooper interrupted, "these are your committee's official investigative findings. They're not preliminary, they're not drafts, they're the actual conclusions of the investigation your committee conducted, and they directly contradict what you told the public." The confrontation had moved beyond simple fact-checking into the realm of accountability for deliberate deception. Cooper had caught Johnson not just making false claims, but making false claims about his own committee's work. The American people deserve to know why you told them your investigation found no evidence when your investigators actually found substantial evidence. That's not a difference of opinion, Senator. That's not political spin. That's a factual misrepresentation of your own committee's work. Johnson tried one more time to deflect. "Anderson, you're taking these documents out of context." "Senator," Cooper said, his voice carrying the full weight of his journalistic authority, "I'm reading directly from your committee's summary document. Would you like me to read the relevant section on air so viewers can judge for themselves whether I'm taking anything out of context?" The offer hung in the air like a sword. Johnson knew that if Cooper read from the actual document, it would be impossible to deny the contradiction between his public statements and his committee's findings. I think we should move on to other topics," Johnson said weakly. "Senator," Cooper replied, "the American people deserve the truth about this. If you're not prepared to explain why your public statements contradicted your own committee's findings, then perhaps you shouldn't have made those statements in the first place." It was a moment of pure journalistic authority, a reminder of what accountability looks like when a prepared, principled journalist meets a politician who has been getting away with deception for too long. The rest of the interview continued in the same vein, with Cooper methodically challenging false claim after false claim, always backing up his challenges with documented facts and official sources. Johnson, clearly rattled and unprepared for this level of scrutiny, became increasingly defensive and evasive. By the time Cooper thanked Johnson for appearing on the show, the senator looked like a man who had been through a professional dismantling. He had come on national television expecting to deliver his talking points unchallenged, and instead had been systematically exposed as someone who either didn't know basic facts about his own work or was willing to mislead the public about them. The aftermath was immediate and explosive. Within minutes of the interview ending, clips of Cooper's fact checks were circulating on social media. The hashtag American People Deserve the Truth began trending as viewers shared the most devastating moments from the confrontation. Journalists across the country praised Cooper's methodical approach to real-time fact-checking. Columbia Journalism School announced that they would be incorporating the interview into their curriculum as an example of how to hold powerful people accountable. Other news organizations began adopting Cooper's model of extensive pre-interview fact-checking and real-time verification. For Senator Johnson, the consequences were swift and severe. Colleagues who had previously supported him began distancing themselves from his claims. Local newspapers in his district published editorials questioning his credibility. His upcoming speaking engagements were quietly canceled. More importantly, the interview sparked a broader conversation about the role of journalism in a democracy. Cooper had demonstrated that it was possible to challenge false claims effectively without resorting to partisan attacks or personal animosity. He had shown that facts, properly presented and rigorously verified, could still cut through political spin. Political commentators across the spectrum acknowledged that Cooper had set a new standard for political interviews. Even conservative commentators who disagreed with Cooper's politics praised his methodology and preparation. The interview also had policy implications. Johnson's false claims about transparency led to renewed calls for government accountability measures. His misrepresentations of economic data sparked demands for more accessible public reporting of government statistics. Perhaps most importantly, the confrontation reminded Americans that truth still mattered in political discourse. In an era when many people had become cynical about the possibility of determining what was true and what was false, Cooper had demonstrated that rigorous journalism could still distinguish between fact and fiction. Young journalists, in particular, embraced Cooper's approach as a model for how to practice accountability journalism in the digital age. Journalism schools began developing curricula around real-time fact-checking and preparation for adversarial interviews. The interview became required viewing for anyone interested in understanding how democracy depends on an informed citizenry and how journalism serves that democratic function. Cooper hadn't just challenged one politician's false claims. He had demonstrated why a free press matters and how it can fulfill its constitutional role as a check on government power. As one journalism professor wrote in the Columbia Journalism Review, Anderson Cooper didn't just fact-check Senator Johnson. He reminded us all why journalism exists and how it can serve democracy when practiced with integrity, preparation, and commitment to truth. The lesson was clear. In a democracy, the American people do deserve the truth. And sometimes it takes a journalist who truly understands that principle to remind politicians, and all of us, what accountability actually looks like when someone has the courage to demand it. If this story inspired you like it inspired millions of Americans who believe in accountability journalism and democratic discourse, make sure to hit that subscribe button and share this video with everyone who values truth over spin. This is exactly the kind of journalistic integrity and professional preparation that protects democracy and serves the public interest. Let us know in the comments what you thought of Cooper's incredible fact-checking masterclass, and don't forget to check out our other videos about the real heroes who are defending truth and accountability in America. The lesson was unforgettable. In America, the people deserve the truth. But sometimes it takes a real journalist to remind politicians what truth actually means and why it matters more than political convenience. Disclaimer: this story is entirely fictional and created for entertainment purposes only. All events, conversations, and scenarios depicted are completely imaginary. Any resemblance to real people, events, or situations is purely coincidental. This content does not represent actual news or factual reporting.